Hello, my name is Oscar. Sorry, I'm very irritated because in a strange twist of fate, for some reason, I decided to check my audio settings on an inkling that, wait a minute, my audio settings were messed up in Discord the other day, which means they're probably messed up in OBS. And I decided to look, and not only is it not set to my camera's microphone like it usually is, it was not set at all. It just said there was no audio device as my mic, and it's like, that doesn't even make any sense. But anyway, hello, my name is Osman Fire. I'm in take number 2. And today we're going to talk about Legends of Shannara, the Measure of the Magic. We might just talk about the whole duology in total because I don't think it's really worth making a third video to talk about it. So, yeah, that's what I said, but I said it with a little more oomph and gusto and excitement, and now I'm just like, I'm also a little tired because I'm now working earlier shifts at work, and it doesn't. I don't mind it, but at the same time, I do mind that I'm not up as late, and my sleep schedule just feels a little wonky now. It doesn't feel right because my body doesn't want to be up early. It wants to be up a little later, but it also wants to stay up later. But, you know, lucky me. Anyway, all right. So we're going to talk about the Measure of the Magic. And the funny thing is that, as in, like, a standalone narrative, it's actually not all that bad. I kind of enjoyed it in a lot of parts. It doesn't have the same magic as, like, the original Shannara trilogy or any of the others I've lauded over the course of this extremely long series that I've been doing for how many years now? It doesn't have the same, but it doesn't have the same, like, pull, but at the same time, the narrative, relatively speaking, isn't all that bad. Now, not to say it doesn't have its problems. Like a lot of these later works, there's more problems than I remember in the narratives, and it kind of irks me every time I start to notice it. Like here, for example, it actually suffers from the exact same problem as the Genesis of Shannara, in that it's trying to juggle too many plot lines. It's like I was complaining about in the previous video that I haven't edited yet. But it's like I was complaining about in the previous video, where, like, there's a lot going on. You know, there's intrigue in the Elven Court, more precisely an assassination in the Elven Court. You know, there's religious conflict in the form of the Children of the Hawk. You know, and then there's the personal character journeys of Pantera Q, Prue Liss, Freen Amarantine, and it's just like there's just so many things going on. And it's only a 2-book series, and it's way too much going on in a 2-book series, and the end result is that the narrative suffers for it. It was about halfway through the book when Freen gets freed from her imprisonment, from being framed, as the murderer of her father, where I'm kind of just like going, wait a minute, we're halfway through the book, and she's only just now getting rescued by the Elven boy Zach Wen. It was a bit of an enigma of a character, just because he doesn't feel like he doesn't belong. It's just that he's kind of just there, and I don't think the narrative ever sells him as like a character who actually belongs in the narrative, and that's to its detriment. But leaving that aside, it's like halfway through the book when she finally gets freed from her imprisonment, and when I realized that, it's like, wait, she's been in prison basically since the end of the last book. How in the world? And the funny thing, honestly, I don't feel like the ending's super rushed, though it does feel a little rushed, and that the trolls get defeated way too easily. But on the whole, the ending doesn't feel super rushed. I think it gets executed pretty well. The defeat of the newly introduced threat of the rag picker, the demon from the world, from the world outside of the valley. And all that. For the most part, it's all relatively smooth, but it is trying to. But the story is trying to resolve way too many plot lines at once, and it's to the detriment of the overall story. It's absolutely to the detriment of the story, and I hate to say that. I'm getting kind of tired of criticizing the Shannara books, but at the same time. And to be fair, it's not like I expected. I guess to be fair, at the same time, it's not like I expected to be criticizing Genesis as heavily as I did. And it's part of the reason maybe why I'm a little bit weary of it. But yeah, no, the narrative, the narrative here just has too much going on. And I'm not really sure if it was like, publisher, like a publisher's contract or what it was precisely, but these two books feel very, and I was gonna make this, and I made this point before when I first read it originally. When I first read the Legends of Shannara originally, it's like I felt like the books were this story was very unnecessary. This is a story that really didn't need to be told. Like, it's okay that it was told, but it's so unimpactful that it's like, well, why bother? Why bother? If you're not going to tell a story that really means something, it doesn't. I don't see the point in it. I guess this is becoming just the broad summary as well as the book critique. But I just never see the point in it. I don't see the point in. And this is what I brought up in the first video again, is the fact that, all these things are happening all at once, and I'm at a loss as to why all these things are happening at once. It feels very convenient that all these things are happening at once. And the reason it's happening, of course, is that Terry is trying to make a story that's worth reading, even though it's not. And so he ends up forcing in all this extra detail, all this extra story, all this extra content into his tale of the end of the Valley's isolation. And it's really obvious. It's really obvious that's what he's doing. And it's kind of frustrating because it's not a thing, because it's kind of an unnecessary, it was kind of an unnecessary, kind of almost error almost, it feels like. It's just like, I gotta stop saying like. I don't know why I picked up the habit of doing that. I do it so much more now than I used to. It's really annoying me because I've noticed it, and it's like, ugh, stop! You sound like a Valley girl. But yeah, the Legends of Shannara it's funny. Like I said, I enjoyed it a little more than I expected to, but there's just too many things I think that ultimately kind of like just don't work out in the end, because it all just feels kind of shallow and not effectively executed. And one of those things, in fact, the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually something I talked about in the last video a little bit, which was the way I was not convinced by the existence of the Children of the Hawk. And the way I continue not to believe that this is a real religion that would crop up in the aftermath of the establishment of the Valley. So for the past half century, the Valley has been dominated, but a very important religion in the Valley is the Children of the Hawk, which basically is it's called a cult, but realistically it's just all things considered, it's just a religion. Realistically, it's just a religion in the context of the story, that's centered around the idea that Hawk in some way is going to return when the protective barrier comes down around the Valley. And it struck me as weird when I was reading the Bearers of the Black Staff, and I realized once I started reading Measure of Magic, I thought about it a little bit. I finally realized what it is. The problem with it is that the Children of the Hawk are the wrong kind of religion. The Children of the Hawk are a messianic religion. They're a very Christianity-like religion, where they believe that basically Hawk, and I mean on some level this makes complete sense, because it's very obvious in Genesis of Shannara that the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, or the Hebrews out of Egypt, I should say. That's a little more accurate. But was basically co-opted as the story of what Hawk was going to do, and it was a prophetic story about what Hawk was going to do. Lead the survivors of World War III into the Valley, the Promised Land. But for some reason, even though the fact that, this has been fulfilled, for some reason it spawns a messianic religion where, Hawk is going to reappear to lead them again. Now, I don't see how this is going to happen because there is because first of all, there's a 0% chance that is something Hawk taught people before he died. Because of course he goes into the mountains, creates the wall of magic, and then returns as a normal man after this task is done to live his life again at the very, very end of Genesis. And the thing is that Hawk never would have taught people that this was going to happen. And the simple fact of the matter is this is a big part of the reason why it just didn't stick in the first place. Because Hawk didn't teach anyone this. Jesus did teach people that, he was going to be crucified, and he was going to return, and he was going to depart, and he was going to return again. This is based on things that Jesus actually told people. This is the thing that Jesus actually told people and taught his disciples. What he taught the apostles. That this is why Christianity spread the way it did. But this is not what Hawk would have taught people. He wouldn't have taught people complete random nonsense that he himself obviously would never have believed. As it is, half of Genesis is spent with Hawk basically being kind of but perturbed by the fact that he has such a grand destiny and his fear that he's not going to successfully fulfill it. He's not going to create an even more grandiose vision afterwards of what's going to happen, after the walls come up. And so the existence of the children of the Hawk doesn't make sense. It's literally just made up nonsense. And sure, a secular liberal from the West Coast, believes that that's what religion is, but religion just doesn't come up out of whole cloth. There are origins to where religions come from, and some of them are date so far back in human history that we don't really remember their true origins anymore. Christianity by comparison is relatively recent and relatively well recorded. Same thing with Islam, same thing with Judaism. Judaism not as recent, but it's well recorded. Why, not just what they believe, but why they believe it. But that does bring up the exact thing that I think the Children of Hawk would be, assuming that a religion would crop up around Hawk. It wouldn't be a messianic religion like Christianity. It would be a post-messianic version of Judaism. And the reason I believe that is because what would happen is that the people of the valley would believe themselves basically to be the chosen people. Like the Jews are the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites are to God. The people of the valley would believe themselves to be a chosen people. Everyone in the valley, honestly, on some level, will probably come to believe this on some level. Wow, I just repeated that twice. That was great. Good job, Nate. Really good in English. But everyone would believe themselves to be to be the chosen people, to be a chosen people that are going to be kept safe and protected. Their Savior has come and he is gone, and he brought them to the valley. He put the walls up, and now they are safe. And if anything, this religion would believe themselves to be protected forever, kind of like how Skeel Isla, the leader of the leader of the Children of the Hawk, kind of behaves in the first half of Bearers of the Black Staff. He would be the sort of person, who would believe that, the walls will be up forever, will be protected from the outside world forever. And in fact, people might start forgetting there is an outside world. That the valley is the only world they've ever known, and so they don't have any reason to believe there's an outside world anymore. After 5 centuries, that's not totally implausible. That's a lot of time to kind of forget a lot of your heritage. You might not forget all of your heritage, but some of it might seem increasingly far-fetched the more time is separated from, yesteryear to today. And that is distinctly what I believe the Children of the Hawk would be. They would not be messianic. They'd be a post-messianic, kind of chosen one kind of religion. Um, and when I realized this, the end result is that the whole Children of the Hawk thing kind of ended up irking me, because in a lot of ways it comes across as like some sort of like it comes across as a little farcical, because it doesn't feel real anymore. Because if you know anything about religious faith, and you don't specifically have to be Christian like me, if you understand anything about spirituality, and you understand anything about religious faith, you realize that, contrary to what a lot of like atheists believe, it's not like completely inherently irrational. People don't kind of just arbitrarily believe things just to believe them. There is foundation to it. There's an understanding as to what it means to them. There are some people that, obviously there's some people that follow faith blindly, but in my broad experience, most people at the very least have some sort of skeletal version, even if they don't like fully grasp the import of like their Christian faith or whatever, they still grasp some sort of skeletal version of their faith that allows them to kind of like hold on to it even in trying times. There's a reason why in times of crisis, everyone doesn't just immediately fall away from religion, doesn't immediately fall away from their Christian faith or their Muslim faith or whatever. And that brings me to something else, which is in The Measure of the Magic, when the ragpicker murders Skeel Isla and takes on his form, right? He takes on the Seraphic's form. That's his title. I remember it now. I was trying to remember it like 10 minutes ago. But he takes on the Seraphic's form and pretends to be him, and basically like holds like a rally in the middle of Glensk Wood, the village, the village that Pantera Q is from. And he's trying to rouse people and trying to get them to make a pilgrimage outside of the valley because he had a vision and everything. And it's basically like some sort of like charismatic tent revival. It's basically what it is. And he's trying to get the people, and he's using his magic to influence them and everything. And in order to demonstrate that, in order to make his demonstration, he takes Pokray, and Pokray is the leader, the foreman, I guess, of the village, the headman of the village, and he takes Pokray and he kills him. He kills him during this revival meeting, basically, where Poke challenges him because obviously the ragpicker is making a ridiculous assertion that there's this troll army outside of the valley that's preparing to invade. And the ragpicker, in the guise of Skeel Isla, is trying to convince everyone to leave the valley because he had a vision. And Poke challenges him, reasonably so. And it's implied that Skeel Isla is, not a very strong man. He's he's not necessarily small, but he's very slight, not very strong. And Pokray is this huge burly man. And the ragpicker literally uses magic to burn his insides, and then he picks up Pogue and throws him 20-30 feet into a tree and kills him. And everyone gets pumped up into a rapturous, into a rapturous woo, you see in these Christian charismatic revivals, people shouting, speaking in tongues, dancing, falling over, etc. And it's like, this is not how people would react to this, okay? It's like, Terry, this is not how people would react to their village leader being murdered in front of their eyes. Some people would get drawn in by this spectacle, but I'll tell you right now, maybe half the people get drawn in by the spectacle, the other half would freak the fuck out immediately. They would be scared. They'd be terrified. They wouldn't want to follow Skeel Isla. They want to get as far away as humanly possible from this guy who shouldn't be able to pick up and throw a 300-pound man into a tree. They would just be scared of him. They would be like, no, what's going on? This isn't right. This is demonic. You know, this is scary. This isn't normal. This isn't rational. You know, there would be no hold on them. They'd be terrified and immediately bolt out of the village. They wouldn't even stay around to find out what's going to happen next. You know, like, again, it's the same problem as the Genesis of Shannara. People aren't acting like real people. There isn't enough complexity and nuance in the reaction of people. And I don't care how much magic the rag picker is using on people. It wouldn't be enough to break people's... It wouldn't be enough to stop people's, like... the trance from breaking. It wouldn't be strong enough to stop the trance from breaking, because there'd be enough people there. Because it's not like the book's saying that he's using, like, a extreme amount of magic. It's not like he's using a huge amount of focus. He's just subtly using his magic to kind of, you know, to kind of influence people. And the book is literally explicit about the fact that he's just being subtle about it. He's not using explicit displays of magic except when he throws Pogue into the tree. And it's like, if he's being subtle about it, then that incredible display of might would literally shatter the illusion for a lot of people. And I'm just flabbergasted that Terry wrote this and thought, yeah, no, this is how real people would react. They would definitely be like, oh yeah, no, everything's fine. Literally just murdered our village headman. You know, that's fine. No, of course they wouldn't. Half of them would be screaming and crying and heading for the hills. You know, it's like, again, this is the problem where it's like, this is clearly, some liberal atheist, writing a story about something he doesn't actually understand. And it just, oh my gosh, it's just so dumb. It's actually dumb. And it really, like, irked me because it was so obviously not written not written in a way, not written by someone who understands what he's writing about. The simple fact of the matter is, if some famous preacher in America right now, let's just say Joel Osteen, because I think everyone knows him, if he murdered a man, in Lakewood Church in Texas, it's like, first of all, he'd get arrested immediately. But second, it's like, the thing that would happen immediately is that everyone would be like, whoa, what the fuck? Everyone would go, like, immediately pause and go, whoa, what the hell did Joel Osteen just do? That doesn't make any sense. And it's actually, and honestly, that's the perfect analogy, because, Joel Osteen is very mild-mannered, he's very meek, he's very, very, very even-tempered, And then honestly, there's a lot of Christians who don't like him because he's a little too mild-mannered, a little too even-tempered, and doesn't have quite enough fire and brimstone in him, to really be considered, like, for a lot of people, a good pastor. But the idea that, he could just, he would just take basically just take a gun and shoot someone challenging him, it's like, it would just immediately just make everyone go, whoa, what's going on? Whoa, what's going on? I feel like I should leave, like, right now. That's what the reaction would be, and this is someone who doesn't have it, and then, like, this is what I'm saying, like, the rag picker's using magic to influence people. And the end result of that is that some people would stick around, but lots of people wouldn't. And the whole thing is just so kind of, like, over the top and silly, and it's just like, yeah, no, this is we kind of lost the plot a little bit here. And then you take the story as a whole, and because that stuck out to me just because of how ridiculous it was. But you take the story as a whole, and the pointlessness of the story comes back to me in a lot of ways, because a lot of people die. Like, a lot of people died pointlessly because of the rag picker. But at least the rag picker is an interesting, like, wrench to throw into the works. But then there's the matter of, like, Frida Amarantine. And what happens to her irks me even more. Because, first of all, she's established as, like, a very impulsive, very aggressive character. And that's fine, though it feels like Terry is like trying a little too hard to push this aspect of her character. It feels like he's trying a little bit too hard, because there's a lot of growing up she needs to do and everything, and she doesn't quite mature ever. You know, she doesn't ever quite mature. She never gets a chance to mature because, of course, she's dead by the end of the story. You know, she just kind of does things because she impulsively does them. And I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I'm not actually complaining about that aspect of her character. But she's dead by the end of the story. So instead of that impulsiveness, like learning from like the impulsiveness or anything, you know, she ends up dying because of it in no small part. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating again, because I feel like there's a lot of potential for a good character here. But she's just kind of, she's not stagnant, but she's not a stagnant character, but she's not like a dynamic one either. You know, she kind of hovers on the line between those two states. She kind of never like regresses, but she never progresses either. She's always impulsive, and eventually the impulsiveness kills her. And I found that really frustrating because I thought she was actually a pretty interesting character. A little too much internal monologuing. She feels a little bit too I feel a little too much like a teenager, because bear in mind she's the daughter of the king. And she's a little bit, and it's like, but she should have been raised when she was young to, you know, be a little bit more proper. And of course she kind of flagrantly ignores that. That's fine as like a character trait, but she's a little bit too, she ignores her upbringing a little too much, and just, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like a real character. There's a lack of subtlety. She's too impulsive, you know. And then it gets really aggravating for me personally when Pantera, you know, now the bearer of the Black Staff's inside her, died in the last book. You know, Pantera Q's now the bearer of the Black Staff. He follows her into the tomb of the what's her face, the Gotrin queen, you know, who gives the Elf Stones originally to what's his name? The Belarus kid from Genesis. Oh, why did I forget his name all of a sudden? Son of a gun. But she gives the Elf Stones to him, right? And then she's really mad because the elves haven't rediscovered their magic. And it's like, well, it's not his bloody fault. It's most certainly not Freen's bloody fault. You're just being a spiteful old bitch. And it's like Pantera follows her down there, Freen, that is, follows her down into the tombs to rescue her. And then because of a mistake she makes, because she doesn't focus properly while using the Elf Stones, they end up leaving the Ashenel entirely, and they end up leaving the valley entirely, and they're days away from the valley. And, and over the course of the story, of course, Pantera and Freen are very confused because they don't know how they feel about each other, because they kind of have because in the first book, you know, they travel together along with the Aurelian brothers, Tasha and Tenerife, and Prue Lys, and this ends up touching off a lot of the events of the story. And when they're traveling out that way, Freen flirts with Pantera, and she's just doing kind of impulsively, and also because she kind of implied to her father that maybe she's interested in him or something. And the end result is that it creates a lot of like emotional confusion between the two of them, until finally, Freen tempts him into bed, and they sleep in, and they don't, not in bed, but they're out in the wilderness, but they basically have sex. And this is like it's not the first time sex is explicitly mentioned in the story. I think the first time the sex is explicitly mentioned and not just implied, in the Shannara series is in Genesis. Or not Genesis. The Voyage of the Jurl Shannara, rather, where I forgot his name, the Omsford there and Rue Meridian, they get together, but they have like a real romance, right? It's a real blossoming romance that is born, and I think I recall I even mentioned that I really liked how their romance blossomed from the intense hardship that they experienced. That as much as I don't like the brutality of the story, I do like how something good is born out of the brutality of that story. And it's that romance. And that's the first time that, sex isn't, it's not explicitly mentioned. Sorry, I'm getting backwards. I'm very tired. That's the first time sex is explicitly mentioned in the Shannara series, but it's like, and it's like basically like they're doing it everywhere on the airship on the way back, and it's like at the same time, and it's like it doesn't bother me because it's a well-earned relationship, whereas here they're kind of like in puppy love, and it's not even that, because it's just, there's mostly just the initial confusion phase where it's like you think you're attracted to someone, but you're not sure that you're attracted to someone, and they kind of just they just kind of bump, they just kind of boink, and then Freen leaves him because she attracts that dragon that they encounter, and we don't even know what it is. We don't know if it's actually, we know it's a mutated creature from the Great Wars. We don't know like precisely how it came to be or whatever. But she attracts it with the magic of the elf stones, and she uses it basically to save the elves. She uses the elf stones to control it, and she rides it into battle, but she gets like shot a bunch of times while riding the dragon, and the dragon's fire hurts her. Also, I'm surprised it's a fire-breathing dragon because it's really just a mutated creature, we think anyway. But she gets severely burned and shot, and it kills her. And the whole thing just feels so empty and hollow, and I hate it. One of the things I really liked about the earlier Shannara books is the fact that all of the romances and everything feel really well earned. They feel good, even when they're kind of sudden and unexpected. And Terry Brooks likes his sudden and unexpected romances, don't get me wrong. But they feel earned. They feel like the kinds of things that, like take even the Genesis of Shannara, where, like, I even complained about it a little bit, where it's like, not John Ross, Logan Tom, and Kirsten Belarus. I just remembered his name. Just remember the kid's name. But it's a sister, of course, that I'm actually thinking of in this case. But whose name I can't remember all of a sudden, son of a... But it's Simmerlin. His sister Simmerlin and Logan Tom, of course, get together. And I don't like how spontaneous it is, because they kind of just meet for the first time, and it's kind of love at first sight. And I feel like there needs to be a little bit more working through Simmerlin's very, very recent trauma. But on the whole, I actually do like it, because I like how Logan Tom finds something to attach himself to. He finds someone to attach himself to. That in and of itself is actually very good writing. But this is just they spontaneously fall in puppy love, have sex, and then she dies. And it just feels so empty, and I hate how empty it feels. And even that last romance that I was a little bit critical of, because of how kind of awkwardly spontaneous it is, nonetheless feels okay, because it's a romance. It's a real romance. This isn't. This is just teenage puppy love, and then it's gone. And it's like, well, what was the point of that? Why does it have to be so pointless? I don't like the pointlessness of a lot of the things that happen in these stories, and this whole story feels pointless. Things that happen in the story feel pointless. Like in this book, Prulis, right? Prulis is a descendant of Candle, who of course has like premonitions, right? She's able to foresee danger, and Prulis is a descendant of hers. She even has her hair. She has the vibrant red hair. And Prue's, like Candle's power, Prue's power isn't complete. It's very unpredictable and doesn't always work when it needs to work. And when Prue gets saved by the King of the Silver River, he says, from the rag picker, he basically tells her that I can fix your premonition, I can fix your power, but you're going to lose something in the exchange. And what she ends up losing is her ability to see colors. And it really hurts her emotionally, because the world loses its vibrancy. And by the end of the book, because basically the King of Silver River tells her that, I'm going to give you your power back, and you're going to use it to help Pantera fight the rag picker. But he says that you might lose something more as a result of it. And she does, because what ends up happening is that because of her sight losing color, she sees this vibrant red bird. It's a dove at first and a hawk at the end. And it's like a bird of prey at the end. And it's basically implied that it's a part of her, that it's like a part of her power. And First of all, this does not get explored nearly enough in the narrative, okay? She only just kind of realizes this after the fact, after it gets killed, after this bird gets killed. And basically what happens is that the bird, when Pantera is under attack, the bird transforms into a hawk and it attacks the rag picker. And it tears apart his face and everything. And then the rag picker gets a hold of it, kills it. And this is what it implies, that it was actually part of her power and not just something the King of the Silver River sent to her, is that she's completely blinded afterwards. And I'm just like here, like, why though? Why take away in bits and pieces? Why does it have to be like this? Why did you write it like this, Terry? What is the point? Like, it's like I brought up with my overall review of the Genesis of Shannara, where I talk about how this feels less like Tolkien and more like Martin, in the way the story's written, where it's like there's always a lot of sacrifice, and there's never and there's less and less of the positive, affirmative parts of fantasy. You know, there's less and less of it as time goes on. It's like Prue loses her eyesight. You know, Freen is dead. You know, Pantera's kind of emotionally not torn apart, but he's like left emotionally ragged by the events, you know, of that this month, the 2 month period, whatever it is, that this you know, this 2-part book series takes place over. You know, it's like, you know, the Belarus line is dead, the Amarantine line, the new line of kings is dead. You know, like, all these things have just kind of been destroyed. And on top of that, the final chapter of the book makes a point to point out that, you know, the people of Glensk Wood, which is a small village of like 3,000 people, and the elves of Arborlawn end up fighting the external threats by themselves. They end up fighting the trolls by themselves. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, you're telling me that, okay, I'm fine with people like kind of being like separated in the valley and not like just being immediate fast friends and allies for over the course of half a millennium. I'm fine with that. But you're really telling me that all the people living in the valley, whether it's the mutants or it's the King Esseline from the villages down south or the other independent villages, you're really telling me that not over the course of like 3 weeks, no one at the very least, even if they didn't send like fighting forces, they didn't send any like scouts or anything to kind of like investigate the situation, make sure that the walls are actually down, actually figure out if their northern neighbors need help. You're really telling me no one did that? No! That's stupid! Like, it's like, And this is what I mean about the whole story being pointless. It's like that's totally arbitrary behavior on the point of the residents of the valley. What do you mean no one came to investigate this? Of course they would. Of course they would. Like, oh my god. Like literally everyone is holding the idiot ball. I don't get it. Like, Terry, what are you writing here? What is the point of the story? Like, all these people are just stupid. Just like everyone was stupid in Genesis, you know, in the aftermath of World War III, everyone was stupid. Like, no, this is not how human beings behave. At the bare minimum, you know, the king, Esseline, he would have at least sent out some scouts. He would have sent out like a little expeditionary force, maybe 50 guys to help, you know? And it's just like, oh my god. It's like, no, stop. This is not how human beings behave. This is not how this would pan out. You know? I'm a big proponent of, you can write your story any way you want. You know, people can behave as intelligently or as stupidly as you want them to. You know? You can write your story any way you want to. And this is how I get baffled by how, like, modern stories, like, you know, modern Star Wars or whatever, gets written badly, because it's like, You don't have to write yourself in a corner. You can, as long as you don't like hard Deus Ex Machina things, you can write your story any way you want, as long as it makes logical sense. The problem is that Terry's did the complete opposite here, where it's like, instead of having people make logical decisions and logical actions and making the outcome of the story make sense because of those logical decisions, people actually trying to defend Declan Reach instead of, the initial expeditionary force gets killed and then no one ever checks it out afterwards. Like, that's not how this would work. But the only reason Terry does this is because, people can't, he wants the rag picker to lead, a couple thousand people out of the valley to get killed. It's like, no, you're just contriving a reason for this to not happen. When instead, what should happen is that people won't do it in the first place. It's like you should figure out a different way for the rag picker to do what he does. Or the rag picker just gets stopped. That's actually not a bad idea either. Why doesn't the rag picker just get stopped in his dastardly plans? That could also be the thing that happens. I don't see why it couldn't happen. The rag picker gets the rag picker gets stopped in the end anyway. So why not just have the rag picker get stopped with a few hundred less casualties? Why is that such a big deal? Why? And by the way, bear in mind, I also noticed here that that it's heavily implied that Panther and Cat from Genesis, right? The ones who stay outside and who I complained about staying outside, even though I did remember, and I didn't talk about it at the time, but I did remember that they basically were the progenitors of the troll race and the troll culture. And I couldn't help but notice, by the way, that the Druge killed that original troll tribe, that original troll tribe, the Karyak. They killed them, a couple of decades earlier. By the way, another plot convenience, another thing that happened in recent history, the Karyak got killed. That's very convenient that just happened to happen recently. And it's like, oh, okay, so their legacy is dead too. So it's like, what is it with killing legacies? Terry, stop it. There's no need to kill legacies. There's nothing wrong with the past. The past is fine. You don't have to kill it. It's fine. But that's what he seems to be doing more, and he seems to do more and more. And I guarantee you that when I start, that was painful. I guarantee you when I start reading Dark Legacy, I'm gonna have these exact same complaints all over again. And when I get to the Fall of Shannara again, I'm gonna have the exact same complaints again. And it's so frustrating because you don't have to write your stories like this. Fantasy can be escapism, and it doesn't have to be pure escapism. You can write fantasy that's kind of gritty and kind of more realistic. That's kind of the appeal of Shannara. It's more gritty and it's more realistic. But the Sword of Shannara, the heritage of Shannara, they had this, their character was was darker, but it still had that sense of, a sense of optimism to it. And the deeper I get, the deeper I retread the weeds here, the deeper I tread back into this bog of the Shannara series, the more I realize why precisely I didn't like the later series. And it's so frustrating and so annoying because I recently, I relatively recently reread the earlier books in Shannara. The more I'm being reminded of what I loved about those earlier books, what I loved about the Sword of Shannara, why the Elfstones of Shannara is still my favorite Shannara book after all this time. What I loved about Wish Song of Shannara, First King, Heritage. Even I pointed out Voyage of the Jewel Shannara gets really dark, but you know what? There's still positive things in it that I could draw out of it. High Druid of Shannara, Word in the Void. Even though Word of the Void ends very dark, that's okay. But the more I get into it, it's like, why do it's like there's too much negative and not enough positive, and that's not ultimately, and I know this is in no small part for me, this is my personal preference and my fantasy. But in the grand scheme of things, I want these stories to like be. I want these stories to be more uplifting, just not super uplifting, you know. You know, there's nothing wrong with tragedy. You know, there could be tragic elements in a otherwise positive story. But I want that story to at least lift me up a little bit instead of kind of tear me down. Because that's what it feels like in the end when I finish reading Legends of Shannara. At the end of Legends of Shannara, it tries to be all happy-go-lucky, you know, like they're gonna, Pantera's about to venture out into the wider world with Tasha and Tenerife. And, you know, and it's like it tries to be uplifting, but it's like, but Prue's blind. And, God, that dog is barking, and my windows are wide open. I don't know if the microphone's picking up on that or not, but it's like, but it's like, it doesn't feel uplifting because a lot of really bad things kind of happen. And it doesn't feel like the bad things got offset by the positives, you know, by the positive outcome in the end. And it's very discouraging. And I don't like that feeling it left me with, you know? And here I'm about to start, you know, Dark Legacy of Shannara, and I remember that one pretty distinctly because I read it a lot more recently than some of the others. And I unless there's details I've forgotten, I know for a fact that I'm not gonna have a super positive opinion of it. But I'm gonna read it. And I'm gonna go over why I don't have a super positive opinion. And maybe it'll surprise me a little bit. Because I definitely think that Dark Legacy was quite legitimately... Wow. I did not enunciate that correctly. I definitely know that Dark Legacy is going to probably be the last series that I'm going to have anything truly positive to say about. And I kind of dread that because I don't like the negativity. I like instead how much I loved Sword of Shannara. And I really wish I could, and I kind of wish already that I could go back to that, you know? But anyway, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, what became, honestly, a bit of an unhinged rant, which is totally normal, all things considered, but it wasn't the intention. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And onward to the next, onward to the next story. There we go. Got it. Found the words. Until next time, everybody.